Okay, so today we're going to really dig into 1 Nephi chapter 20.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. And honestly, it kind of feels like a message for, people today, even though it was written so long ago.
Oh, absolutely. Like it's speaking right to us right now.
Right. And it starts off so strong. Right from the first verse, God is saying, "Hearken and hear this, O house of Jacob, who are called by the name of Israel and are come forth out of the waters of Judah or out of the waters of baptism, who swear by the name of the Lord and make mention of the God of Israel, yet they swear not in truth nor in righteousness."
Whoa.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like right off the bat, God is calling out those who are, maybe talking the talk but not walking the walk, saying all the right things, going through the motions, but their hearts aren't really in it.
Yeah, you see that a lot today, right? Like people putting on a show of righteousness, but not actually living the principles.
Yeah, and it's like God sees right through that.
Oh, he does for sure.
He's not fooled by outward appearances. He's looking at the state of their hearts.
Yeah. Exactly. And then just a few verses later, you get this super intense imagery in verse 4. Thy neck is an iron sinew, and thy brow brass.
Oof. It's not a compliment, is it?
No, not all.
I mean, what do you think God is trying to say here?
Well, it's a metaphor for stubbornness, right? Like a refusal to bend to God's will.
Okay, I could see that.
Yeah, you can almost picture someone with their head held high, refusing to listen or even look at God.
That iron sinew, like a rigid neck, unwilling to turn toward God, and then that brass brow.
Right, a hardened heart.
Wow.
It's like they've built up these walls around themselves. They're so set in their ways that they can't even hear what God is trying to tell them.
And isn't it interesting how that ties back to what we see in verse 3?
How so?
Well, God says, "Behold, I have declared the former things from the beginning. I did show them suddenly." It's like he's emphasizing that he knows everything past, present, and future.
Right, he's omniscient.
Exactly. And it's like he's anticipating their excuses,
Oh, like he knows what they're going to say before they even say it?
Yeah. And then in verse 5, he actually addresses it. "Lest thou shouldst say, Mine idol hath done them, and my graven image, and my molten image hath commanded them." So it's like they're going to try to blame some outside force for their actions, good or bad.
Yeah, classic blame shifting.
Total cop-out.
And it's so human right. We love to take credit for our successes, but when we mess up, it's always someone else's fault.
Or something else's fault.
Right. We have trouble acknowledging God's hand in all of it, both the good and the bad.
And I feel like that is a major frustration for God in this whole chapter.
Oh, for sure. And you see that especially in verse 8. "Yea, and thou heardest not. Yea, thou knewest not. Yea, from that time thine ear was not opened. For I knew that thou wouldst deal very treacherously, and was called a transgressor from the womb."
So God knew they wouldn't listen, but does that mean we don't have agency?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a theological debate that has been going on for centuries.
What do you think?
Well, it's complicated. Some people argue that God's foreknowledge means we don't have free will. But others say God knows our choices without dictating them.
So it's like he knows us so well, all our strengths and weaknesses.
Exactly. He knows our tendencies, but he doesn't force our hand.
Okay, that makes sense.
So even though he knows we might stumble, he still offers us his love and his mercy.
Yeah, and we see that so clearly in verse 9.
Right, where it says, "Nevertheless, for my name's sake will I defer mine anger, and for my praise will I refrain from thee, that I cut thee not off."
It's like he's choosing to withhold judgment, not because we've earned it, but because of his own nature.
He's a God of love and compassion.
So powerful. It's a reminder that no matter how far we stray, his love is always there waiting for us.
Always. And that leads us to this incredibly important concept in verse 10, where God says, "For behold, I have refined thee, I have chosen thee in the furnace of affliction."
The furnace of affliction.
Yeah, it's not a fun image, but it's crucial.
So you're saying God isn't punishing us, he's refining us.
Exactly. He's molding us, shaping us into something stronger, more resilient.
So those trials, those difficult experiences we go through, they're not setbacks, they're opportunities.
For growth, absolutely. It's like a blacksmith forging a sword in the heat of a fire.
That's a good analogy.
It's through those fires that our impurities are burned away and we become more like him. Yeah. It's not always easy, though, is it? Going through the fire.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
But I guess that's why it's called refinement, right?
Right. It's a process.
Oh.
And it reminds us that even in those really tough times, even when we feel like we're being burned, God is with us. He doesn't leave us to fend for ourselves.
Yeah. It's like that verse in Isaiah. "But now, thus says the Lord, he who created you, O Jacob, he who formed you, O Israel, Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you.
Exactly. Such a powerful reminder. And speaking of powerful, there's one of the most amazing declarations in this whole chapter. It's in verse 12.
Okay, let's hear it.
Hearken unto me, O Jacob, and Israel my called, for I am he, I am the first, and I am also the last.
Ooh, yeah, that's a heavy one. It's like such a statement of God's eternal nature.
Right. He's outside of time, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end.
And it's a huge comfort.
Yeah.
Knowing that no matter what's going on in our lives, no matter how crazy things get, God is constant.
He is. And his power is just undeniable. Like, look at verse 13. Mine hand hath also laid the foundation of the earth, and my right hand hath spanned the heavens. I call unto them, and they stand up together.
It's like a mic drop moment, right? He created the universe. He holds everything together.
Right. It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it?
It does. Like all of a sudden, my problems seem a lot smaller.
Yeah, and it helps us focus on what really matters.
Which is?
Him seeking his will, aligning ourselves with his purpose.
Right, and then that leads us to the call to action in verse 20. Go ye forth of Babylon, flee ye from the Chaldeans, with a voice of singing declare ye, tell this, utter to the end of the earth, say ye, the Lord hath redeemed his servant Jacob. What's the deal with leaving Babylon?
So in this context, Babylon represents wickedness, worldliness, anything that pulls us away from God.
Okay, so it's not necessarily a literal place.
Right. It's more of a state of being.
Like a symbol.
Exactly. It's about separating ourselves from those negative influences and seeking righteousness, aligning ourselves with God's will.
It's about leaving behind the things that are holding us back from our spiritual growth.
That's it. And it ties back to that imagery of the iron sinew and the brass brow.
Oh yeah, how so?
Well, think about it. Where in our lives are we being stubborn? Where are we resisting God's will? What idols are we clinging to that we need to let go of?
Wow, that's deep. It's like a personal inventory of our own little Babylons.
Right, and those can be anything, material possession status, unhealthy relationships, anything that's become more important to us than our relationship with God.
It's a tough question to ask ourselves, but it's so important. And then we see in verse 21 that even when we do choose to leave Babylon, the journey isn't always easy, and they thirsted not. He led them through the deserts. He caused the waters to flow out of the rock for them. He clave the rock also, and the waters gushed out.
It's a reminder that even when we're wandering in the desert, God provides for us.
He's there every step of the way.
He quenches our thirst, guides our steps, gives us the strength to keep moving forward. But then there's this stark contrast in verse 22 between those who are seeking righteousness and those who are clinging to wickedness.
What does it say?
And notwithstanding he hath done all this, and greater also, there is no peace, saith the Lord, unto the wicked.
So even though God has done all these amazing things, even greater things, there's no peace for those who are living in wickedness.
No. It's a powerful reminder that true peace and happiness, they don't come from worldly things.
They come from aligning ourselves with God, seeking his righteousness, becoming more like him.
Absolutely. And that takes effort. It's a conscious choice we have to make every single day.
Yeah, it's like this constant struggle, between our human nature and our divine potential.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's like we have these two voices inside of us.
And we have to choose which one we're going to listen to.
Absolutely. It's a choice we make every day, a constant effort to align our will with God's will.
It's hard, right? There's so many things pulling us in different directions.
Oh, totally. Distractions, temptations all over the place. But what gives me hope is that even though this chapter starts with a rebuke, it ends with a promise.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
Well, remember verse 18. Oh, that thou hadst hearkened to my commandments, then had thy peace been as a river, and thy righteousness as the waves of the sea.
Wow, yeah. That's beautiful imagery, like a river flowing, constantly waves crashing endlessly.
Right, it speaks of abundance, like an overflowing of God's blessings.
And it's such a contrast to the state of the wicked that we talked about earlier.
Yeah. Verse 22 is pretty clear about that.
Yeah.
And notwithstanding he have done all this, and greater also, there is no peace, saith the Lord, unto the wicked.
So no matter how much they might achieve in the world, without God, there's this emptiness.
The lack of true peace.
Like all the stuff, all the success, it just doesn't fill the void.
Exactly. It's about more than just checking boxes or going through the motions.
It's about that deep personal connection with God.
Right. And that leads to genuine peace and lasting joy.
And that connection is available to everyone.
It is. We just have to choose to seek it.
We have to be willing to humble ourselves.
To turn away from our own little Babylons.
And embrace the refining fire of God's love.
Yeah. It's a process, but it's so worth it.
Well, this has been an incredible journey through 1 Nephi chapter 20.
It really has.
And we hope it's given you something to think about.
Yeah.
Maybe even inspired you to examine your own life.
To see where you might need to make some changes.
To seek God's righteousness and experience the fullness of His peace and blessings.
That's what it's all about.
So be sure to follow and subscribe to our podcast for more deep dives into Scripture and other fascinating topics.
We'll be back with more soon.
Thanks for listening.